Hi, everybody. It's Dana Brigman. It is Thursday afternoon. And as I promised yesterday, I wanted to spend a little time talking about nutrition and getting you a little more information about that. Um, if you're following along at any point, please just give me a couple of little likes. Invite your friends to the page. I don't normally ask for this, but Facebook is getting more and more challenging for people to actually see content for the groups they're in. So appreciate a little support that way. I am going to be looking at a couple of notes periodically, so I apologize for that if it feels like I'm not talking directly to you, but knowing my heart that I am. But I will have to check a couple of notes since this is going to be a bit longer of a presentation. And so really this is about helping you start to make some decisions and become a bit more aware about the decisions that you're making when it comes to what you're putting into your dog's food bowl. Now, if you follow me as a trainer, you'll often hear me say there are no bowls because I like to do a lot of gameplay, nose work, earn your food kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it's really what's going into the belly, what's going into the body of the dog that will help them be more nutritionally balanced and ideally have better health overall and perhaps even a longer life with all of us. And that's really our goal, is to grow old healthy. So I want to share with you just a few things that I'm not sure everybody is aware of. So some of you may have heard this content from me previously, but as we have a lot of new members in the group, I will be sort of digging into this again. Please ask any questions that you have, and I'll be happy to help you. So one of the things that we talk about on our food choices is where it falls on the scale or the range of nutritional value, right? And a lot of people will think that people food is off the list, that people food is the lowest nutritional value of all. And that may be true if you're giving them bread and French fries, right, from your diet. But if we're giving them real fruits, real vegetables, and fresh meat, then people food might actually be your best option in the long run. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about what it takes to balance a home prepared diet, but don't turn off people food. And I'll tell you too, one of the things that I think is it's funny how we think sometimes. We'll say, oh, I'll never give my dog people food, and yet we are giving them popcorn and French fries and bread, and we talk about grain-free diets and not having corn in the diet. Well, what is popcorn, right? What is bread if not grains and corns that we are offering our dog as a snack or as a treat? And if that happens on a frequent basis, we might be upsetting the nutritional balance and not really contributing in a good way to their overall health. So don't throw off people food as being bad. So where we move into next is the lower grocery store brands of kibble, right? And I was there. Many years ago, I was one of those folks. I'd go in the grocery, I'd buy my food, I'd buy dog food, and I'd move on about my business. And now I look back and reflect on what I know today, and I'm really sorry that I did that to my dogs. Because what we see in these grocery store brands, these lower end brands of food, is a lot of starch. And so I want everybody to go pull out your bag of kibble and look at the label. There's a section on there called guaranteed analysis. And this is an important part of the labeling, right? What we find is something called crude protein, crude fiber, crude fat, and crude moisture. When you add those 4 crude elements up, you will get a number that is not 100%, right? It's not 100%. It's going to be somewhere around maybe 30, 40, or 50%. Seldom is it much higher than that. So then you say, well, what's the rest of it? What's the difference between 100% and what your total adds up to? And the difference is carbohydrates. That's what's in the bag that is not documented in a measured percentage, right? They don't list it as a percentage. So if you find yourself in a range of 35, 40, 50% or more carbohydrates, you're basically putting down bowls of sugar for your dog. And we know that sugar has a host of issues that can lead to problems in the body. So we want to really get ahead on this protein side of things. Now, even that gets to be a little bit tricky, right? So now marketers have gotten wise. We're all looking for protein to be in the bag. And what we know from labeling requirements is that whatever is the largest percent single ingredient must be listed first. The ingredients as single ingredients are listed in the order of how much is in the bag. So you're starting to see things like real beef, real chicken, real fish, whatever it may be, show up as that first ingredient. But they've gotten trickier. We also then start to find other plant-based protein sources in the bag. So you got to read all of those items and figure out, are they showing you a carbohydrate? Are they showing you a vegetable? Or are they counting that as a protein source? It's not always clear, right? But so you could have some meat, and then you could have a bunch of plant-based protein that makes the total percent of protein in the bag, right? So that's a little bit tricky. In some of these lower brands, you also see marketers getting a little creative where they will say things like accents of pumpkin and blueberries. And guys, I'm telling you that might have waved something at the bag to get an aroma of it as they were producing it, but there's not much in there. And so where you can start to do some analysis about that is look on your label to where salt, like table salt, S-A-L-T, is listed. What we know is that salt cannot be more than 1% of what's in the bag. So again, if we're looking at all those ingredients in a linear order relative to, the percentage of total ingredients, anything listed after salt has less than 1%, right? So if you start seeing things like cranberries or pumpkin seed or any of those kinds of things that would ideally be helpful and nutritious, it's less than 1% of what's in the serving or the bag as a whole, right? So that's not good. That's not necessarily a nutritious benefit. It just looks good and sounds good to those of us who have been uneducated about these topics. The other thing that we find in these bags of lower end kibble is a lot of dye, D-Y-E, and artificial preservatives, synthetic vitamins and minerals. So we could have a dog walking around that's eating his food. And when we say eating well, I mean he eats all that we give him, right? He could be walking around with a mineral or nutrient deficiency simply because he's not getting enough in his food. So when these manufacturers make kibble, it's cooked at high temperatures, right? Cooked at high temperatures, which really then cooks out the vitamins and the minerals. And so they add those back in, but they use often synthetic products. And so what happens there is most of it just passes through the body without proper absorption. So you could have a dog that is taking in said vitamins and minerals and still be deficient in many of these areas, okay? So, and then we have to look out for grains. Of course, we've all come to learn that we don't want grains in the bag, and we don't want corn in the bag, right? And now we know we don't really want soy in the bag, right? So all of those things can cause us to have some itchy scratchies, some reactions, some digestive issues, a fair amount of issues. But I really want you to think about feeding these long term can truly lead to disease in your dog's body, right? And so this is one of those things, and if you follow me and hang around long enough, you'll hear me talk about the camel's back, right? We look at our dog and they look healthy, and we continue on whatever path we're on, and everything's going well until one day it is not. And then it's bad, right? Then we find ourselves in a world of angst and heartache and difficulty trying to figure out how to recover from all of this. And so we need to start learning that all of these things that are put into these bags of food as processed foods are not healthy. And over time, the compounding effect of this could lead to a lot of damage in your dog's body. Now, I know you're going to argue with me, some of you, and it happens every day, that you can go out to the big mega retailer and buy the cheapest branded dog food, and we've got a dog that's lived 17 years old, right? That happens sometimes. It can also happen to the cigarette, alcohol drinking old man or old woman that lives to be 101 who says, I've been doing this all my life and I ain't going to quit now, right? Can we, we don't know. What I do know is that right now, we are seeing a slightly higher than 50% of our dogs who will be affected, with serious diseases that will take them from us, right? So that's bad news. So if I can get ahead of this and do better nutritionally, then that's part of where I'm headed in my goal of trying to have my dogs, and ideally myself, live to a ripe old age, but be healthy doing it, okay? So the next thing we move into is these prescription diets. Now, y'all, for years, this is the uneducated Dana, right? For years, I thought that a prescription diet meant it had a prescription for whatever ailed my dog in it, right? That there was medication in it for those types of issues for which we would be feeding that food. And that's really not true. What we find is there are greater restrictions of what's in the bag. So the manufacturers take out things that might contribute to those issues. And then, of course, we're getting medications and things of that nature. I've spoken with a number of veterinarians, and they have told me that if we call the manufacturer about the prescription diet, that the manufacturers will say these were not intended to be long-term food products, meaning we're not supposed to have a 5-year-old dog that goes on a prescription diet for the next 10 years of its life. That's not how they were supposed to be. So what do we do then, right? We've got to find other ways to add nutrient-rich food into the dog's belly than some of these prescription diets. What we know about this is we still might see some synthetic vitamins and minerals going into these bags. So again, we could have a dog that is getting deficient in other areas, right? So we could be trying to address one area of issue in the body and simultaneously be creating a deficiency elsewhere for other organs of the body that needed those nutrients. So that could be a problem. We know that deficiencies in vitamins and minerals can sometimes present what appears to look like a vitamin toxicity. So you can have too much, you can have too little. So it's really important that we stay on the course of veterinary care and getting our blood work done. In fact, I recommend to folks that we get a blood work every year. A lot of times we will do it based on when we got the dog, right? I try to sync that up into the dog's birthday, so I know based on where we are and we can track things appropriately. But as long as you're doing it yearly, I think that's really the important thing. The key is, what's your baseline, right? What's your baseline at this point in time as a young puppy or a growing, maturing dog? And then over the years, are we seeing those baselines shift? Those are all indicators of potential issues that we need to address. Okay? So in this range of food, in this prescription diet category, one of the things that we step up from the grocery store brands is we typically don't find dyes in the food. Right? We've started to eliminate those coloring of products. So if you're looking in a dog food bowl of kibble and you're seeing red and green and yellow, that's for your eyes. It's to make us think there's vegetables in there. Your dog's not going to see that. He's not going to care what color it is. He cares, does it taste good? And that is to trick us into thinking that there are vegetables in the bowl. Same is true for those little meat shapes and all. I'll add here that in generally all of our kibble choices, remember we talked about it being cooked at a high temperature processing experience, and all of the nutrient and whatnot gets cooked out. What also gets cooked out is the flavor. So it's been studied and tested and whatnot that when you put down a bowl of extruded kibble for a dog, they don't eat it. They don't actually want to eat it. They don't understand that it's food until they go back and spray on fat. So they add back flavor and fat because it all got cooked out. They spray it on, sometimes with fats that have been repurposed, reused. They were used elsewhere, and now they're sort of being used as a secondary purpose to add flavor to your dog food, right? That's kind of gross, if you ask me. So the next step we move up to is what most of us think of as a natural kibble or more natural product, a premium product, if you will. So these are the products that you're going to find more in the boutiques and the little specialty retailers, right? And what we find in those food is we've started to eliminate preservatives, artificial preservatives, that is. We're starting to not see artificial preservatives in the bag. Instead, you're going to start to notice on your label that vitamin E and rosemary may be used as a natural preservative, right? So we're getting a little bit better as to the quality. You still probably have far more starch, far more carbohydrate in that bowl of kibble than is ideal. It's still one of those very starchy, sugary kind of things, okay? What we also see is that grains might be in the bag, and grains aren't terrible if we're using the right grains. However, we sometimes now see grains replaced with white rice, potato, or tapioca. So we find ourselves with potatoes that fall into the nightshade of products. And guess what? Many of our dogs have a reaction, a skin reaction, a digestive reaction, an inability to absorb reaction to potatoes, right? We sometimes also find in these foods millet, which is more digestible than other grains and more digestible than potato. So as long as we're eliminating soy, wheat, and we don't have a negative reaction to potatoes, then we're doing better, but we may not be ideal. All right. So then a lot of people want to move into canned food. And I have so many clients that bring me a bag of kibble and a bunch of cans and say, put a little dollop on this for them, right? And the big question is why? If you're using food from the same vendor, is it the same product? Mostly. The big variance in a canned food product is the moisture content, right? There's a lot more moisture in the can than would be in the bag of kibble. Now, why is that important? Because to get kibble to become digestible and to shift into usable energy, we have to bring in water to the belly to help get that digestion going, right? Where does the water come from if you feed your dog a bowl of dry kibble? Well, of course, it comes partly from the water that they drink, but the body needs that water, right? The body needs that water. And so we do what is called organ robbing, where we start pulling reserve water from other organs of the body, including the kidney, the liver, the heart, the skin, so that we can start to break down the kibble that has gone into the belly. That process for kibble takes about 15 hours on average. So that means your dog's belly is typically never empty if you feed them twice a day, which most of us do. But that means that digestive system is turned on and working pretty much 24 hours a day. It's often why when a dog eats a big bowl of food and 3 hours later it comes back up, that it still looks the same way that it went in, right? It's because it has not had the time it needed to be digested and become usable energy. What we know about home cooked food or raw food diets is that total process can take as few as 4 hours. So that's a significant difference, right? That's a significant variance in how hard the body has to work to do its job. Okay? We'll come back to that in a second. So now we're still in this canned food. What we often find is that there's more meat, right? There's more real meat, and there's, again, a lot more moisture. What we sometimes see, though, is in those rolled products, right? You're going into the retailer now, and we're seeing rolled food. It is probably still cooked, of course, right? So there may be some out there that are designated as raw, you need to really read the label and validate, is it truly raw, or has it been cooked and is really just canned in a different form? Okay. The advantage to not being in the can is inhibited sometimes by the liner of the can itself. So if you ever look at open a can of dog food or some of your food choices, depending on brands we're buying, there may be a plastic liner that would be intended to keep the can from rusting, right? Aluminum cans would rust over time. That liner and some of these wrappers of these rolls of food might actually contain BPA. And we know that BPA can leach into the food and the products that we're trying to consume. BPA is an endocrine disruptor, a hormonal disruptor, right? So we sometimes don't think about that, especially for those who have spayed and neutered their dogs. We wouldn't necessarily see it in the same way. So if you're a breeder, you would know if your dog is unable to reproduce. Those of us with spay neuter dogs, we don't know that. We don't know that they couldn't reproduce. But we might also be affecting things like the adrenals and other hormonal things that are important to the health of our dog. Okay. The other thing to note about canned food, these formed rolls, is that they are often containing something called carrageenan. So you got to read the label. And that's carrageenan, Carrageenan. Carrageenan is used in studies to create inflammatory bowel disease, right? So scientists and folks trying to create medications and products for us to use carrageenan to create inflammatory bowel disease so they can create a medicine to fix it, right? So that to me would be kind of off the list. So if you've got a dog with bowel issues, we need to check, is carrageenan in his food? Is that part of the digestive issue that he's having? It might be. The other thing that I want you to take a look at in canned food is the cost. So you have to step back and really do some analysis and think about cup for cup, pound for pound, volume going into the animal. How much does it cost to feed these products? And canned food is probably going to be more expensive. It's certainly more expensive than kibble. And at the end of the day, it's probably more expensive than you think. So for me, for years I resisted changing to the Volhard diet. I had seen Wendy Volhard speak at a dog trainers conference years ago, and I thought, that sounds awesome. And so many trainers were using it and telling me how great it was. And it's not a product that has, up until this point, been highly commercially marketed. It's been sort of under the radar a little bit. And unless you knew about it, you wouldn't know about it. So unless somebody is telling you about it, you probably haven't heard of it. But I thought, I can't feed all my Great Danes and my foster dogs this food. I thought it was going to, sort of break the bank, so to speak. So I resisted it for a little while. And I started seeing, issues that I needed to address. And so as I stepped back and really did the cost analysis, deep dive into the cost analysis of where else could I offset product, and that includes offsetting things like flea and tick medication, or the frequency of shampoos, or medications that are intended to deal with itchy, scratchy. And that's a whole nother topic, y'all. We'll do that one later. But when I looked at all of those add-on products that I needed and all the add-on supplements that I needed and the medications, pound for pound, cup for cup, I came out ahead by making the switch to better food. Okay? So if you need help with that analysis, I'm happy to talk to you about it. So then we move into home cooked food, right? I am not a great grocery shopper. It is not my favorite thing to do. And I'm also not really big into spending a lot of time in the kitchen to measure and calculate, and this 50-pound dog needs this, and this 11-pound dog needs this much, and this 22-pound, that makes me crazy, right? It's not my thing. Nor did I want to go out and source, well, I've kind of shifted into the raw, but we'll start there. I didn't want to go out and source the protein and the muscle and the organ meat and all that needed to be in the bowl for those true prey models, those raw models. So a lot of people don't want to do that. And so they'll say, I'll home cook my food. And I know a number of people, a lot of people start with some brown rice, maybe some white rice, depending, but let's call it brown rice, lean chicken, and peas and carrots, maybe some green beans. That is not even almost nutrient balanced, right? So there's a whole host of vitamins and minerals and fat, right, that needs to be in the bowl. If we're feeding chicken, which I'm not a big fan of because chicken can cause a lot of reactions in the body. A lot of animals might have some loose stools and things of that nature, digestive issues. They don't manage chicken very well. It may also create some of the itchy, scratchy issues that we see quite a lot. And we have to think about how the chicken is grown, right? So you might find organic chicken is better for your dog than not. But I tend to stay out of that category personally. It's just my choice. But if you're feeding chicken, even if you're feeding turkey, don't take the skin off of it. We need to use that, right? The dogs need fat. And as they age, they might need a bit more fat in their diet than they did in their athletic performance years, right? So fat fuels the brain. We can't strip that from the dog's body. Peas and carrots wind up being more starchy, sugary than kale and spinach, right? So you really need to look at nutrients of those vegetables and home preparation items that you're using. There is there are a number of recipes, and if you need some help with it, I'm happy to help you. But look at fishes, look at beef, look at, I don't do lamb, but you could look at lamb, turkey even. Now, here's an interesting thing, right? Turkey, we eat a big turkey lunch and we're going out taking a nap, right? We're like, oh, got to keep my eyes open. Same kind of thing can happen to your dog. So if you have a performance athlete, turkey might not be your best choice. There's another conversation we'll have about protein selection based on what your dog's individual body needs, right? And sometimes we see that based on their behaviors, and there's a lot of indicators that may help us choose the right protein and the right vegetables. But typically, if we think neutral proteins, which beef is one, that and seasonal vegetables, seasonal fruits and vegetables, right? Choosing ones that we know are safe for our dogs. Like we all know no grapes, right? We all know no grapes, no onions, right? But if we think seasonal squashes and spinach and kale and watermelon and things of that nature, then we find ourselves in a better balance. And it doesn't have to be 100% balanced every single day. It could be balanced over the week, meaning today they might have gotten a little more protein because that's what we had, and tomorrow they might get mostly vegetables. That's okay, right? That's okay as long as we wind up with the right nutrient balance over a reasonable period of time, not necessarily over the month, but over a reasonable week or so. So having said all that, there are great supplements that you can add. One that I like, if you're not ready to make the leap from kibble to home cooked or kibble to raw, Volhard has a product, called Endurance. It comes in a 1 pound bag. It's a little powder, and you sprinkle like a teaspoon, maybe a tablespoon, depending on the weight of your dog, onto their meal. And it adds back vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and things of that nature that they are missing from their kibble-based diet and often missing from their home-prepared diet, okay? Many people start to see a change, such a significant change when adding a product like that into their kibble or their home-prepared meal, that they're like, okay, if this made this much of a difference, how much of a difference am I going to see if I really shift to a raw-based diet? And the possibilities are you're going to see a significant one, right? So when we move into raw, we have a couple of options, and there are some purists, if you will, who believe that the raw diet should be what's known as fur, feather, prey model kind of thing, meaning you go get a bird or you go get a squirrel and you say, here, puppy, enjoy, right? That's a little too much for me. I'm not a hunter. I'm not going to be out doing that. If you do still stay into the prey model, you've got to manage the calculation for the percent of meat, percent of protein, percent of bone, percent of organ, and so on, right? So some people only feed that meat-based diet. Some people then start to use that meat-based diet and add in some vegetables, right? So you've got options of ways to work through this. For me, I found the Volhard to be my solution. It is dehydrated, everything that you need, pre-calculated, pre-designed, everything you need but the protein source. And you add the protein source fresh to the bowl, uncooked, every day. It works great, meaning my clients are using it. We're seeing a tremendous improvement I don't know. I know some dogs that we have had to tweak with some additional supplementation, but it's a fantastic food. It's convenient. It winds up being more affordable than you think. It's a great option. Me and my skepticism a few years ago, before I was really deep into all this wellness, I was using Volhard and I said, there's got to be something less expensive, right? There's got to be something sort of on par with this. And I tried Honest Kitchen. So I could order that online and have that delivered straight to my door as well. And started feeding it to my dogs. And I noticed that Poppy, so my 50 pounder, she's right at 49 pounds, was losing weight. She was losing a lot of weight, and to the point that I'm like, oh my God, look how ribby she is. And the bottom line for that was, even though the box per pound was less expensive, so cup for cup, pound for pound, the purchased product cost me less. I would have had to feed her more to sustain her weight based on her metabolism, her athleticism, and so on, right? It's not a bad food, in my opinion. It just, again, pound for pound, cup for cup, it didn't add up. So I switched back, and I'm not going to change. Maybe there will be some magic food one day, but right now I think I'm in the right lane for my little senior citizens and Poppy. There are a couple of brands, a couple of choices in there. One is what they call their NDF2, which is the prepackaged, dehydrated, you add the meat. There is a recipe for you to make the exact same thing at home, so should you choose, right? There is another product called AMPM, which is separated out, and the mix is separated out differently. One's called a porridge and one's called a crumble. And you then separate out when you give your dog protein and when you give them vegetables, right? So it further allows us to control what the body has to do for digestive purposes. So when we move into our little senior citizens dogs, or those dogs that are having added digestive issues, or perhaps have some issue with overall wellness, and we need to support the body in a different way, that split of when the protein and when the vegetables are going into the body can be super beneficial. So that's an option. And then there is a gluten-free product that will be coming out in the very near future. Now, I didn't mean for this to be a sales thing. If you want Volhard, I'm happy to help you. I'd love to help you. If you're doing home cook, I'll help you with that too. But one of the things I love about this Volhard stuff is Wendy and her husband passed some time ago, but they've developed this, and Wendy's continuing to do the testing. She has fed this to her dogs, many dogs over the years. Those dogs get blood tested all the time through every life stage, right? Their annuals. I think she probably does it more frequently than that. I'm not entirely sure of that schedule, but I know it's tested on a regular basis through the blood work to see what's going on with those animals. The products are created in a human grade facility. The products are tested, they're retested, and they're tested a third time before they make their way to you. So I really appreciate the depth of quality control that goes into the manufacturing of this food and the way that the company is working. There are people like me, affiliates, who go every year and study with Wendy and learn more about the food, learn more about nutrition, learn so that we can discuss this stuff better. And then we also learn more about things like homeopathies and essential oils and whatnot. I've taken essential oils to a whole different conversation. But for me, it all comes together. I can no longer separate out wellness and nutrition and homeopathy and essential oils from behavior and training, right? It's the whole dog for me. They've got to all sort of come together. So having said all that, if you guys have any questions, let me know. I added a link into the start of this. It's just a little, they call it a gallery. It's out on my blog. There's maybe 20 little graphics out there that each have a topic about, do I need fats in my diet? What about calcium, right? Where do I get that? How do you manage the calcium to phosphorus ratio? Do I need digestive enzymes? The answer is yes, and so on. There is, that little gallery's out there with talking points on each of those topics that may give you a little more food for thought in this whole category to get you started. Okay. So, I'm going to end us here for now. There's actually, I'll do part 2 of this maybe tomorrow and share a bit more with you guys. Okay. All right. So I hope this was helpful, and I'm looking for you to ask some questions, add a comment, tell me you've watched the video. Please click like. Whatever questions you have, I really want you guys to feel like you can start to ask and get some supportive information. Okay. Remember, I'm not a veterinarian. I cannot diagnose, treat, cure, prescribe anything, but I can tell you what I know. I can tell you how these products work and what we need to know about them, and how nutrition is going to come together and help with a lot of the issues that you have. Okay. Thanks for watching.